Let's go! Yes!
Yeah, boy!
Yeah, let's just do that. Yeah! There we go. We don't need mics. Just blow them out. I got my jaunty hat that's 11 years old and I have not worn once. I'm wearing my cool Ohio State hoodie. George, you've got your jersey on?
Jersey I've had since the last national championship.
Damn right. What does that tell us?
Right.
That tells us that Ohio State is the best college football team in the entire country. And that my friends,
so good to hear.
Oh, it's so good to hear. And look, I feel maybe I'm over exuberant for someone who predicted them to lose twice in the college football playoff. But we're going to ignore that. We're going to focus on the positive. We're just going to look at this sick hat. I've literally never worn this since 2014. I got it as a present. I was like, I want to keep it until the next national championship. And lo and behold. So now I have to buy a new one, which I will then keep on ice until the next national championship, which I expect to be next season. So Ohio State.
Until then, Johnny's celebrating by dressing like a scene kid from 2000.
Yeah, that's right. I'm not 40 years old. I'm 22, and I'm here to party. Okay.
You just need some Gauge earrings. That'd be a good way to celebrate.
That's right. Some Gauge earrings, some eyeliner. Should be good. So Ohio State won a national championship. They beat those dastardly Notre Dame Fighting Irish in a game that was never in doubt. I never had any nervousness whatsoever. We'll talk about that. I am kind of freaking out a little bit. And I will say this. In the immediate aftermath of the game, I was like, I think I'll explain the exact sequence of events kind of when we get to it about how I was reacting in the moment. But after the game, I was just kind of like, I didn't know how to feel. I didn't know how to act.
I don't know what to do with my hands.
I don't know what to do with my hands. And so after the game, I was just like, okay, I got to write. I got to do all this stuff. And then the next day I was still, like, wow, this is really cool. It didn't hit me until this morning. Like, honest to God, I was driving to work. I know. I really hadn't fully processed it. I was trying to think of it in a logical way. And this morning I was driving to work and I was listening to the talk radio, 97.1, all that kind of stuff. And Bobby Carpenter was on and just kind of speaking from the heart. And he was talking about kind of, the brotherhood and all this kind of stuff that I tend to dismiss or ignore. Right. Like, it's like, oh yeah, that's great. But he really, 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 really meant it. And it felt like he was back being a college football player, talking to the other college football players, and it got me, man. Like, it hit me like break my heart. And that's when I started to really like, holy crap, this is going to be something that you remember for the rest of your life. And the way they did it and the manner in which they did it, we're going to get into a little bit. This is going to be a bit of an Erstaz. I don't know how you say that word, but it's going to be a weird dubcast. It's not going to be our typical, kind of format.
We're just gonna nothing weird about basking in the glow of the ultimate.
There's nothing weird
victory.
about a 40-year-old man wearing a snapback like at an angle.
This is the only context in which that's appropriate. I am a 30-year-old man wearing a jersey, which I was raised to believe you're not supposed to do that after.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Like 18 or whatever.
That's actually one of my favorite things about Ohio State fandom, how we completely disregard that and how pretty much everyone wears a jersey. I love that because honestly, this is for real. And we're going to get to the national championship. I want to make a very serious point. This is important to me. I love that Ohio State fans wear jerseys. And the reason for that is that it implies a certain amount of egalitarianism, a collectivism where everybody's in it together. People like to criticize it like, oh, you think you're getting on the field? No, I don't think we're getting on the field. I think we're all wearing the same thing, the same uniform, because we're all the same. We're all in this together. This is Ohio. I'm part of this, right? I'm going to support the most I can. And I don't have to wear a freaking ascot like they do in the South. I'm going to wear a uniform to show that I'm with the team and I'm not special. We're all special. And I love that. I love that sensibility. So yeah, Ohio State fans keep wearing the freaking jerseys.
I would feel more guilty about it if I had like bought a new jersey or whatever, but because this is literally the jersey I've had since I was in middle school, like this is Ted Ginn, and it has since evolved into both Dwayne Haskins and CJ Stroud. I have the coveted,
never feel bad about that.
The coveted legacy sleeves that everybody loves.
Hell yeah.
None of those red stripes. No, don't need any of that. If I had bought a new jersey and started wearing that as an adult, I would think, that leaves me open to criticism.
No, it doesn't.
Because this is literally the same jersey I've been able to wear since I was in like 6th grade. I have absolutely no guilt about it. I have grown up both in and with this uniform, and it is a reflection of my experiences as a fan.
Well, there you go.
I have witnessed 2 national championships in it now, one when I was in college as a junior, which will live with me forever. And to be honest, once it happened, I was like, I'm low-key worried I will be tortured as an Ohio State fan for the rest of my life, because I kind of deserve it for having this great of an experience in college, that I get to witness this. And now I'll have it teased in my face for the rest of my life.
Well,
like
guess
it was in
what?
2020. And then this game happened.
All
of that went away.
Let's talk about it. All right. So here's the deal. We're basically, the way I've decided to structure this particular episode of the 11 Dubcast is I just have questions. I want to know what you think, George, and we're going to talk about it. I want to start with just a point that I want to make about the game in general. All right. Here's my general point. This is what I want people to kind of take away from both this game, this national championship, and then this college football playoff the Ohio State Buckeyes just went through. This has never happened in college football, right? And I feel like Ohio State as a program,
the team has never won a national championship.
That's right.
The way Ohio State has.
No one's ever beaten Notre Dame in a major football game, in a bowl. No one's ever defeated Notre Dame in a bowl game. No, here's my point. A gauntlet like this simply has not existed in college football up until this point. Now, it exists because of the way the playoff is structured. I'm not saying like Ohio State did some kind of crazy thing to create, this gauntlet of Tennessee, Oregon, Notre Dame, Texas, etc. It's part and parcel of the format that they're in. But to be the first team to go through this, to beat so many top 10 teams, to beat top 5 team after top 5 team after top 5 team, that just has never happened before. And so I just want, when we look back on this in the years, to come, every national championship, every huge achievement by any sports team has its own kind of unique story. And I think the story here that I want people to remember is how damn hard it is to do what Ohio State just did. Now, going forward, every team that wins a championship is going to have to do it. But I think we're going to have to rethink these notions of toughness and some of these narratives that we have about college football teams, because Ohio State just showed that you can dig deep and do things that people never expected from you. Okay. Now, never is probably a pretty strong word for this particular team, but after that Michigan game, that probably is pretty applicable. So to come out against Tennessee and Oregon and Texas and Notre Dame and do what they did, I don't think there's anything that compares to it in the history of college football. It's unbelievable. So that's my first general reaction. I want to know what yours is.
Well, I think that we already need to, tear down and rebuild and restart the playoff. It's clearly compromised.
It's flawed. We can't do it. Yeah, right.
Everybody. Yeah. Well, it's what I heard from at least one Georgia beat reporter that said the regular season has been ruined because Ohio State should have been, toiling with the agony of defeat after Michigan ruined their season, and they shouldn't even be in this position, which is funny because it's like, if we were still in the 4-team format, Georgia wouldn't have even been in the playoff.
Also, didn't Alabama win a national championship after losing to Auburn in the same year? Like, not a great Auburn team either. Like, this is not necessarily without precedent as far as that goes.
No.
So I don't know. I think that's a stupid.
No, but my larger point is that, like, people, we're already seeing the goalpost move.
I know.
There's people that they just won't accept that Ohio State was the team to do it like this.
I think they're a little pissed about it.
A lot of people are.
Yeah,
Whether
I
they're
agree.
Michigan fans who are trying to say, well, we beat the champs, that makes us the
Cool. Put
champs
up that
again
banner.
by
I don't care.
proxy.
Go for it.
And
Put up the banner. Put up the banner. Like seriously, talk your talk all about that, and then see how far it gets you. Right? Like, see in like 10 years, where like, hey, but we beat Ohio State that year. They won the championship. Do you think anybody's going to care? No. They're going to point to They're going to point to the big, fat ass trophy in the Woody and say, guess what? Who cares? So. Like, it's not going to matter.
I hope so. I mean, we'll get into that a little bit later, but yeah, I mean, this was about the only thing that could have been soul restoring for me as a fan relative to
it had
that.
to happen.
Well,
it had to happen.
And it happened.
It's freaking nice. Happened.
Unlike what happened in the Michigan game, it's nice when your expectations are satisfied.
I agree.
Anyway, but you also have, I mean, I haven't really heard this point as much from Oregon fans, but definitely the Georgia people, in spite of the fact that they lost their quarterback from the conference championship to the first round. A lot of people saying the teams that did the best, the top 4 seeds, were punished with a longer layoff, and that's why none of them were able to win.
Okay,
it's
sure.
It's so funny that, while Ohio State, I'm trying not to go out of my way to make the point that you're making, which is that like nobody's ever run the gauntlet like Ohio State.
Right.
And it's absolutely incredible that they did this, because it's like, yeah, and every team's going to have to do that going forward if they want to win.
But Ohio State was the first, and that's what's important to me.
But it's just so funny watching all these other teams that hate Ohio State move the goalposts in terms of how impressive of an achievement this is, because a very, very similar thing happened in 2015, the first time they won the first format of a college football playoff.
It did, and we're going to talk about that too.
Already kept trying to sandbag the achievement and how impressive it was that they were able to get it done the way that they did.
Right.
I'm thrilled.
Well, let's talk about
this is great.
Let's talk about them doing it the way that they did. We're going to talk about the national championship. We'll be back. By the way, this is kind of a bonus Dubcast. We're going to be back on Sunday as well, recording and then publishing next Tuesday. We have so much to
tried
to
tell people we were going to be late this week, and we lost like 5 followers on Twitter. So evidently people are very upset that.
Well, we're back. We're back, guys. I promise.
You're not on Tuesdays anymore. I'm out. For those
Tuesday's the only
out.
day I can listen to podcasts.
Exactly.
So we're going to do one. We're going to have another one on our regular time. There's so much more to talk about. We're going to focus this one on the national championship game. So again, I've got a lot of questions. I'm just curious, George, about what your answers are to them. The first thing, I just want to know what your reaction was to that first Notre Dame drive, where it's that 9 minute, like 18 play drive that went 75 yards. To me, it was like almost a carbon copy of what Michigan did to them, right? Where, the ideal Michigan thing where it's just destroy the clock, score, and prevent Ohio State from getting back into it. What was your overall reaction when you saw that go down?
Michigan didn't run, what's his name? The glorified running back that has since hit the
like Alex Orji or
they didn't run Orji the way they were running Leonard in that game.
No, Leonard had like 9 carries on the first drive, something like that.
Well, right, and after the second one, I told everybody in our Slack, I said he's about to get a JT Barrett-esque workload that would make Urban Meyer blush, and then he got 7 more carries. So I was feeling pretty good about that assessment. I think most people that were paying attention figured that was going to be the case too. I was surprised that a lot of people were saying like, "Oh, they can't keep running him like this the whole game, can they?" And I'm like, "Well,
they can try.
It depends on how much clock Ohio State gives, or like what if they're able to respond. Because if they didn't equalize, they didn't respond with.
They would have done the exact same
immediately.
Thing.
They could have very easily done that and killed another 10 minutes.
Right.
So it wasn't an encouraging start. But the other thing I've noticed too with this team this year, with the defense specifically this year, is their bend don't break. And they've often let their opponent, I don't want to say let as in they're intentionally letting their opponent score, but they often absorb the best blow that their opponent has early in the game. And then they make adjustments very soon after the fact to mitigate them from being able to play the way they want to, and forcing their opponents to make adjustments if they want to have success. which Notre Dame did much later in the game. But by that point, they were already down 4 scores. And Ohio State was in a position where they had enough of a lead where they could afford to play to not lose as opposed to trying to pour it on.
I think a big part of it was just, like you said, the fact that Ohio State kept counterpunching, right? And they scored on their first 3 drives, and that totally threw Notre Dame off schedule. I agree with you. I think they would have loved to have played that game and just kept doing what they did on that first drive. They didn't have the ability to. I mean, first of all, Ohio State started keying in on that quarterback run. They brought their linebackers way closer to the line. But also they had to pass. They didn't have a choice. They were getting down by 2 scores. I mean, what are you going to do about that? So,
but then they had a lot of success throwing the ball in the second half. In fact,
they did.
I don't know if we actually talked about it on the show last week, but we're coming to the realization pre-show that Ohio State had only given up 1 touchdown of more than 30 yards all season. They'd only given up 5 touchdowns of more than 20 yards all season going into this Notre Dame game. And then the 2 last touchdowns Notre Dame scored, I think, were both from further than 30 yards out. Right. I know the first one to Greathouse was where he broke the tackle from downs and then ran in. I think the second one was too, but it might have been from within. I can't recall the exact amount, but it was interesting to me that, people wrote off Notre Dame's ability to throw the ball in this game, particularly against this defense, when that was exactly where they ended up having the most success, to the point that they were able to make it a 1-score game within the closing stretch. So
I think Riley Leonard, he's not a polished passer. I mean, he was sailing some balls and, he missed some key passes and some reads, but he's also really, really talented at making things happen, like on the fly, right? And, when he was scrambling, when he was running around, that's when he found guys like Greathouse and their tight end and whatnot. It wasn't necessarily because these were how the plays were drawn up, but he was just really, really good at escaping pressure. Ohio State got up to him twice, but I think he easily, wormed his way out of another 2 or 3. I thought he played really well, and I thought Ohio State, that's what gave Notre Dame, that's what gave them life in the second half, was him being able to create on the fly. If they had tried to stick with their game plan from the beginning of the game, Ohio State puts the clamps on them and they don't score another point.
I said during the Georgia game, and maybe even in the game before that there's been a part of me that has wondered, like, what does this Ohio State team look like if they brought in Riley Leonard as opposed to Will Howard?
It'd be interesting.
I'm not sure there's really much of a drop-off, if I'm being, or not. I don't even want to say drop-off, but I think that they're 2 very, very similar players in many respects.
In a lot of ways,
and,
yeah.
And
they're both gamers, yeah.
If you've seen the metamorphosis that Howard has had under Ryan Day, you wonder what Ryan Day would have been able to do with somebody like Riley Leonard. Now, Leonard was coming off of an injury last year, so there was certainly more risk involved with bringing in a guy like that than someone who was a little bit more proven and, coming out of a healthier situation, literally, in terms of Howard. So obviously it ended up working out. So,
well, I want to talk, we'll talk about Howard actually in a little bit, because I've got a few things I want to say about that dude. But okay, so the first Notre Dame drive happens. Ohio State responds. The second question I had for you, I think maybe this might surprise some people when they think about it, but were you surprised at how much Ohio State ran the ball during this game? Right. And in previous games, they had been, I think, more pass heavy than run. And I think the narrative had been going into the national championship that Ohio State's just going to pass all over you, particularly because of the failings that they had against Michigan. Right. Like, why would they predicate their offense on the run? But they had 62 offensive plays. 41 of them were rushing attempts. Right. They had Will Howard dropped back 21 times. So did that surprise you at all, or did you kind of see that coming a little bit?
No, it was 3 games they had on paper on tape in the CFP where their game plan was pass to set up where the run where we can.
Right.
So it's your job as a play caller and as an offensive coordinator to not fall into a pattern of predictability that the defense can capitalize on.
Right.
So it didn't necessarily surprise me. And I'm not I try to stay very much within my fan brain the first time I watch a game. I'm not like
no, yeah, you
actively,
can't. I mean, you
like,
got to enjoy it. You can't
give me
sit
the
there
all
and,
22. I want to
yeah,
see
yeah,
every scheme, every test, so I can scrutinize every decision
right.
that Jim Knowles made. Although I was very scrutinous of all the third and long blitzing that happened in
Oh,
this
sure,
game,
yeah.
but we can get into that
Well,
later.
yeah,
But
that's
in any event,
yeah.
I try very much to just appreciate what is unfolding in front of me as it happens the first time I watch any game or while I'm watching it live. So it didn't really surprise me. I wasn't really. I'm actually surprised you telling me now that they were that run heavy, because it seemed like they were throwing the ball a fairly decent amount.
Yeah.
But I mean, when they did throw the ball, I mean, Howard completed his first 13 throws. Is that right?
Which is
They were
a
very
national
good about
championship
picking their
record. Yeah.
spots. And you can only do that. You can't complete 13 passes in a row, running 13 passing plays in a row.
Right.
You got to keep the defense honest.
Exactly.
And they did a really good job of that.
And I think one thing that they really were intentional about, and this is one of those things that we do have to see the all 22 and see what Kyle Jones has to say about it and whatnot. But I have a very strong inclination that Will Howard was told to just take off. Like if your first or second read isn't there, go. Because again, Notre Dame, because of the way they play defense, they're going to mostly focus on man, but they do mix in zone and some other things like that. That leaves wide swaths of the middle of the field open sometimes, especially when you've got deep threats.
Which he hardly capitalized on the rest of this season. I don't know if that was a
Ohio
point
State
of
didn't at
emphasis
all.
that they didn't want him to take off
Exactly
on those throwing plays.
And that was a huge tendency break. Absolutely.
I was relieved that, we made the point that it seemed like they were saving Howard runs as their fourth down secret weapon for most of the season, which is what they did in the CFP and against Penn State towards the end of the game. But in this game, they would get into third down and short situations, and they wouldn't be cute about it. They'd say, what you did with us with Riley Leonard on the first drive.
Right.
We got a guy that can do the same thing. And here's a taste of your own medicine.
And I think that's what's so crazy about it. They had not done that prior to that game. They had literally sandbagged on that for 15 games and then said, oh yeah, Will Howard ran for 700 yards or something. That's what I think so crazy about this, is that he's always had that ability, but they were figuring out ways to judiciously put that into the offensive playbook. And I seriously think, man, I think they told him, look, use your feet. They're going to be so focused on Emeka Buka, Jeremiah Smith, G. Scott, Brandon Ennis, Carnell Tate. They're going to be so worried about who they're going to throw to. They're not going to be worried about where you're going to run.
Well, I also think maybe a bit to the detriment of the team's regular season performance. This is kind of a thing under Ryan Day where it's like we save an element of the offense that could probably be implemented with greater regularity for when we need an ace up our sleeve playing the best teams that we're going to face in the postseason. The example that everybody likes to point to is how they used the tight ends against Clemson in the 2020 game.
Right. Why not at any point in time before this?
They did nothing but block all season. So that's the new meme, or I shouldn't say new meme, but that's traditionally where we wait for the tight ends to actually show. In this case, the tight ends actually didn't even show up receiving at all this season, but you were very complimentary of Kasmeric last week, and he did have a good block with.
He had a great
G.
game
Scott
blocking
on that little that was my favorite play call of the game when they ran that trips and they put two tight ends out with Judkins in the bottom right part, and I was like, okay, if you're first of all, if you're a defense and you see a running back lined up in trips with two tight ends, you should know that that's going to be a screen. You should probably stand it out, but. Thankfully, they didn't.
No,
and I love that. That told me very early on. It's like, okay, Chip is
he's in his bag a little bit. Yeah. So that was actually my next.
Then they called a direct snap to Jeremiah Smith. And I thought, okay, no, they're not. This is a disaster.
That was the one stupid play call they had the entire game. Everything else seemed pretty on point. That was ridiculously dumb. But that was what I was going to ask you. Your favorite play call of the game. I think that's an excellent candidate. They were super creative. with some of those play calls.
That wasn't my favorite play call.
Oh, okay. What was your favorite play?
But in terms of design, it was.
Okay.
No,
So what was your favorite?
I mean, another close candidate for design, obviously, is, the touchdown they had to Jeremiah Smith was very slick.
The first one?
Nice. Yes.
Like the very first one they scored? Yeah,
yes.
that is my favorite of the game because it was a mirror image of what Alabama did to them.
Right.
And it's a sick play call too, especially when you've got a guy like Jeremiah Smith. He had the corner on him who was just freaking out like, look at this guy. They fake motion with him.
What was he freaking out about anyway? He's like, they have this guy. He's
right.
good. No, I think everybody you're
Jeremiah
playing with
Smith's on the field, guys. Somebody's got to cover him.
What could he have been saying in that situation?
I don't know. It was really weird. And then it was funny too because I think the other team, his teammates didn't really see what he was doing. He fakes like the end around or whatever they were doing, the crosser,
which was set up by the terrible direct snap earlier in the drive.
Yeah, right. And 10 dudes all went to the left side of the field, and then he just stops, turns around, and then that's it. And it's like it's pitch and catch. It's
the same thing
play.
Devonta Smith did when they played.
And you know what? And that's the thing. For years as an Ohio State fan, I would watch teams do stuff like that. Like one that always bothered me that I saw teams do that I feel like multiple teams did this to Ohio State was that tight end leak. You know what I mean? Where you've got the tight end, they fake the block,
tight end
and they
delay. It's devastating.
Yes, and then you just go in.
Michigan, that's like a bread and butter concept for them.
Right.
Ohio State would never get wise to it
and
for some reason.
Right, and I was so angry as a fan. Like, why can't Ohio State do stuff like that?
Yeah.
Like it's simple, but it's devious. And then I saw
our tight ends need to block.
Yeah, well, right.
That's why.
But I saw that, and I was like, hell yeah, dude. I mean, let's do this. Let's go. And I'll admit, I was a little. I was a little nervous after that first Notre Dame drive because I'm like, man, this is the blueprint. That's how you beat Ohio State. But then Ohio State just hit 100 on.
I don't know if that's how you beat Ohio. We hadn't seen a team do that to that defense all season.
Well, that's what I mean. I mean, that's how you like. They went down. They ate up 9 minutes of clock and scored a touchdown. And I'm like, okay, well, if they can replicate that, then that's trouble.
It is how you beat them in the sense of like, it's funny, people comparing this team to Mike Tyson and heavyweight punchers.
Yeah.
It's like the way you beat the bully is you hit them in the mouth first.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what Notre Dame did on the first drive. So conceptually, yeah. But I mean, I was, not to go back to the previous question, but you were like, did that surprise you at all or whatever? And I mean, it did. You just asked feelings about it. It did surprise me a little bit, but not to the extent that I was like, "Oh God, this is going to be the theme of the game now?" They've totally, I picked 31-13 Ohio State, and now it's going to be the 31-13 the wrong direction. This is a disaster. So.
No, I mean, I thought Notre Dame's only real path to victory was making it a super tight game, low scoring. I thought they just had to limit Ohio State's possessions as much as humanly possible. And like I said, that first not a 9 minute, 18 play touchdown drive is how you do that. Now, again, could they have continued to do that all game? I don't know. I mean, it would have been really hard to run Riley Leonard.
I would have liked to see Riley Leonard get 36 carries.
I don't think Riley Leonard would have. He was in pain after that.
He would have done it.
He would have done it, but man, that dude was getting beat up.
You gotta go balls to the wall, man. There's nothing left to play for after this, win or lose.
That's true.
So going back to
ahead.
The Smith play real quick.
Yeah.
I it's funny because I remember watching that play in the national championship. Ohio State lost, and thinking that is such a great play call for a player like Devonta Smith, because not only because of the amount of attention he's commanding, given he's the Heisman Trophy winner, but also because I don't know how many receivers have that kind of change of direction where they're going to be able to pull off a concept like that with consistent success.
Right.
And I largely attributed it to the fact that he was, route a slot, you know, kind of your prototypical NFL slot receiver.
Yeah, he's the guy.
He's
He's the guy who can just put his foot down and change direction on a dime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeremiah Smith is not the size of Devonta Smith, but he
No.
has the agility of Devonta Smith.
Correct. Yes, he has the ability.
That really speaks volumes to what that guy's ceiling is. That he's able to run the concepts of an NFL caliber slot receiver
as a freshman
with the size of an NFL jump ball specialist.
Right.
No,
that's an excellent point.
He's an absolute menace.
Yeah.
But that wasn't my favorite play of the game.
Okay.
My favorite play of the game was the last completion of the game.
Oh,
because they totally I remember thinking, like, I remember dreading the two plays before that, where
and then what they were going to do on third down, like, oh, here we go.
They're exactly.
Right? Yeah,
right. And it's like they're going to have to give the ball back now. This is a disaster. But they totally set Notre Dame up for. And it was great, too, because Notre Dame earlier in the game had been kind of deking them into trying to look. One of the plays where Howard took off, they showed cover one.
Yes.
And so they were getting ready to go over the top.
Like,
and then right before the snap, they motioned back into cover two.
Right.
And Howard was looking to get Smith the ball deep, but he was double covered. And so he had to escape left and then ultimately gained yards taking off. But that play could have been like Notre Dame successfully deked them into trying to do that.
And that's their MO. That's what they do. They love
they hadn't been able to get the ball where they wanted. Even though Smith had a great game, they were never able to get him the ball deep where they wanted to, like the way that they did against Oregon. They had been waiting to do that the whole game. They didn't force it like they tried to do to come out of the second half against Texas. They waited for their opportunity, and in a moment where it felt like, oh my God, they're playing not to lose and they're going to give the ball back. They have to now because it's third and long and the clock is their friend and they need to be killing clock.
Right.
They take advantage of the feeling of the situation and they catch Notre Dame coming heavy to try to stop the run, and they just put it over the top. And Howard, we've been criticizing the deep ball all season. Or not all season, but
it's been perceived as a relative weakness, right? Like,
he puts Notre Dame to bed with perfect ball over the top.
Beautiful.
And Smith catches it, and it's game over from there. It was fantastic.
I want to say
play call.
A couple unsung heroes on that particular play, and then also something that Chip Kelly said. So Chip Kelly pointed out, he was like, this was not a difficult play call, right? Like, we knew they were going to come at us. He basically just laid it out. He said, look, if they showed blitz and backed out of it, we're going to hand the ball off. And if they blitzed, we were just taking advantage of the one-on-one that we had. We know he's going to win that every single time. He wasn't even on their best corner. So it's like, oh, of course we're going to do that. The two unsung heroes, Emeka Egbuka hit a ridiculous dig route on that, where he brought in two guys, I think a safety and a linebacker, and basically just completely screwed up their coverage because he ran a perfect route. And then when they brought in the extra guy, they brought in the seventh guy, right, to blitz. Travion Henderson had an incredible block to prevent the blitzer from getting to Will Howard. So both of those things had to happen to make that play work as easily as it did. I think it probably would have worked regardless because they had Jeremiah Smith and man. So I don't know what you're going to do about that. But that was really a team effort. It was a great play call by Chip. It was great individual effort by multiple guys. That was a really cool play. And, to ice a national championship like that, I mean, that's a badass way to do it, man. And that's the thing. Like, I think sometimes teams are remembered for moments like that. And it wasn't Notre Dame just ran out of time and blah, blah, blah. And that's what the, narrative would be. It's Ohio State grabbed that victory by the throat and took it. And it
was heading towards that narrative.
It was, and they changed it. They changed it. Exactly. That's my point. That is exactly
That's why it was my favorite play of the game, is because it totally restored the good vibes instead of the dread that had been creeping in.
That's right. And
honestly, I was thinking right after Judkins scored that touchdown in the third half, and you and I were both like, folks, This is
That's
happening.
right. That's right.
And Dan, I was like, oh God, I hope this isn't going to be a jig. Dan said they're actually going to do it, guys. And I was like,
well, here's the thing.
You had to
if
say
I say
that,
something stupid,
you had to say that in this situation
Right.
with that much time left.
Look, if I say something stupid, that's fine. But Dan saying that, I was like, well, maybe I'm
Dan's
right,
supposed
because
to be the oracle.
Yeah, right. Like if Dan said something, it's not going to be stupid. It doesn't make sense. I was nervous. This is my next thing. I was nervous about a Notre Dame comeback because I thought it was just going to be some ridiculous karmic thing, and like Ohio State would get shot themselves in the foot and blah blah blah. And this is going to be the biggest comeback ever.
I wasn't nervous because the best they could do was tie.
That's true, and
if
that
they
kind
could
of
have
kept me on
captured
an even
the
keel.
lead, I would have been more worried. And I'll tell you something else. I really like I totally like I felt very, very confident they were going to, when they kicked the ball, even before the miss, I just remember thinking, it's insane that you would try to make a two-score lead with a field goal. And even
some
then,
people were trying to justify it too, and I don't understand that. Like
they were like, "Oh, well, if he had made that kick, then that would have been much more consequential in this."
Yeah, that's fine if it's the third quarter.
If you go for it and you convert the 2-point, then the game's actually tied.
Right.
Then Ohio State, you're not having to sell out for the run if you're Notre Dame because you're not thinking they're in a kill clock situation. You just have to play straight up defense and get the ball back.
That made no sense to me. And like, I understand people are like, oh, well, it's the stats or whatever. Well, you got to take into account the fact that the clock is running, right? The clock is your enemy.
When ESPN shows that analytics, they're like, the analytics say go for it in this situation. That little pop up thing in their ticker or whatever. Now,
that was a stupid decision. I don't know why Marcus Freeman did that. And then of course he doinks it, and that actually took a huge measure of weight off my shoulders when that happened.
Karma from the football gods.
That's right. But I guess that's my next question here. So was there a specific point where like Ohio State has this in the bag, where in the game where you're like, okay, it's done, it's over, I'm not going to feel nervous about this anymore? Was it that big third down conversion?
It was when Judkins had the big run in the third.
Okay.
I was like, okay, if they're like, the fact that they're able to get this big of a play on the ground, like they're going to probably score.
They'll keep doing
this play.
That's
and when they score and go up, this is too insurmountable of a lead.
Yeah, I was pretty sure once they hit the third and 11,
is just too much.
Yeah,
for any team.
I was pretty sure when they hit the third and 11, that's when my negative ass finally felt some relief. But really, I didn't feel fully. Here's what I was doing. When they were lining up for the field goal, I was like chewing on my hoodie that I was wearing. I was just like, and then when Jaden Fielding, who by the way, 4 for 5 in the playoff, multiple field goals over 45 yards. The Jaden Fielding redemption tour is complete.
No, don't care. He's still the reason they lost to Michigan. I'm never forgiving him for that.
But when he hit the field goal, I said, all right, I'm done. I got up. I got something to drink. I went to the bathroom, and then I watched the last 10 seconds. I was like, I'm good. My emotions, I'm gonna work them out. I'm just gonna walk around a little bit because I was just internalizing that for most of the 8 hours of commercials that we had to sit through. Let me ask you this.
I was more nervous about him making that kick than Ohio State losing the game generally.
But he hit it, man. He hit it. Offensive and defensive MVPs. Will Howard, I think, is going to get a lot of the flowers here, and deservedly so. I mean, he's the guy. I think that was
game number 8 with 80% or more completion.
It's baffling how much better he's been as a passer. Like, I understand why, right? Like, he's gotten better. Ryan Day is a really good quarterbacks coach. He has amazing weapons to throw to. All of that makes sense to me. But going from a guy who was a lifetime 57% passer to a guy who now has the best completion percentage for a season in Ohio State history, okay, that's better than Dwayne Haskins. That's better than CJ Stroud. That's better than Justin Fields. That's better than a lot of dudes that people consider to be like these great accurate passers. He now owns the most accurate passing season in Ohio State history. 73%, which is ridiculous. Okay. People talk about offensive MVPs. You want to give it to him, completely earned. I do have to say this. Donovan Jackson going from a guard to left tackle, the most important part of the offensive line. And I saw this statistic after the game. He allowed against Tennessee, Texas, Oregon, Notre Dame combined 1 quarterback pressure.
Pressure, not even a sack.
Exactly. No sacks.
Pressure.
In 4 games, 1 pressure against these elite defensive lines, some of the best in the country, going against their number 1 defensive ends. 1 pressure.
Yeah, for an interior lineman, like
that's
converting
insane
to an exterior lineman on the
that
fly.
That doesn't happen in college football.
No, it doesn't happen in football, period.
Yeah.
It's absolutely absurd that there was no period of growing pains whatsoever.
I mean,
it's so crazy. It makes you wonder why they even gave Zen Mikhalski a shot, you know? Not to throw that guy under the bus, but
you're right.
It's so baffling that it's like this guy had this kind of potential at this position. It's crazy that just wasn't your plan A.
And he was a great guard. I mean, I think that's part of it. You're like, well, we don't want to we don't want to take a guy away from a position that he's already.
No, but they still had Seth at that point. I mean,
exactly.
It wasn't like they were going to totally ruin the interior of their line. And they had the option of putting Hinsman in for him where he was better playing guard than center anyway at that point.
Yeah. So he comes out and just plays in a way I don't think anyone could have anticipated. It's unbelievable what he did. And I think that more noise needs to be made about that particular performance.
I still see a lot of national draft people saying that Simmons is going to go ahead of him in terms of left tackles in the draft.
Yeah.
Has a team ever had 2 left tackles go in the first round of the draft?
I'm going to guess no.
That would be unreal if they were able to pull that off.
Yeah, that sounds unlikely, but Donovan Jackson's earned it.
They're both first round projections.
They're both, I think, first round talents. Donovan Jackson made himself a butt ton of money performing the way that he did, and he earned it. All right, so let me ask you this. Defensively too, just real quick, defensive MVPs. To me, it felt kind of like a group effort in this game. I don't know that there was any one guy who really stood out. I will say that I thought JT Tuimoloau was really good. Kind of like he didn't get a ton of attention. Yeah, he really stepped up and got some pressures in key points. I thought he played really well. Caleb Downs, weirdly, I think they kind of neutralized a little bit. He had a few missed tackles.
I think it was his worst game of the season, easily.
Yeah, I don't think he played that well. So it's interesting.
Well, Greathouse broke his tackle when on that long touchdown he had. Like he missed a lot of play. He had a couple really great plays late in the game, but he he's one of those guys that is usually like shutting down so much of the field that you almost like don't see his name called as much as you would expect. But he was on tape, like having plays made against him more in this game, I noticed, than any other game during the season.
Yeah, I agree. But yeah, on the other hand, you still had guys who were performing really. I thought Burke played really well in general. I mean, obviously he looks better again, opposite of Igmanosin, who is committing a personal foul every single play.
See ya, buddy. That's the biggest reason Notre Dame was able to come back.
Yeah, that was pretty bad.
It was so funny. It's like, oh, who's been pointing this out all season that he's been getting away with this? And they finally. Oh, speaking of flags.
Yeah, I know. We haven't talked about it yet.
Not only did they finally start
the moment
calling
that I knew Ohio State was going to win
for holding, or not for holding, but for just pass interference and whatnot generally. But finally,
our long national nightmare is over.
This is almost more worth celebrating than a national championship.
That's honest to God.
Buckeyes finally got a holding call for the first time since September.
And the funniest thing about it is that it was on like the most ticky-tack hold too. Like there were so many other things.
Not even. Tyleek had gotten held on a play earlier than that, and I thought, oh, they missed it. Here we go again. So when Tyleek got held on that play, I was like, they're not going to call it.
Yeah.
But then they said the flag was out, and I literally was like, I'm sitting there with my family. I'm like, is this it? Is this it?
Ohio State's going
to win. And then where our Slack exploded.
Oh, I know. We all lost our minds.
There was that got a bigger pop than when they actually won the game. Like that's how much we were freaking out.
That's
about
true.
It.
All right. So real quick, we got a few more things before we get to ask us anything, and we'll do some closing thoughts.
Well, we didn't say you said it was a group effort, but it's still got to be Cody Simon, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to say Cody Simon
by default.
Yeah,
it's like when the Seahawks won the Super Bowl in 2013 or whatever, and they gave it to it was like KJ Wright or whatever his name is. The one nobody even remember. He was Super Bowl MVP, and nobody remembers what his name was. But it's like the whole team just kicked the Broncos' butt so bad that they could just all win MVP.
Yeah, I think Cody's. I mean, he obviously got it on the field. They gave it to him after the game. I think the Dubcast can give him our defensive MVP as well. I thought he played really well. But yeah, I think it was more of a collective effort than any one like gigantic individual performance.
I agree.
So got a few more things we'll do. Ask Us Anything, and then we'll do some closing thoughts. So we've got 2 national championships, right? And I don't want to say within living memory. Obviously, there's still people around who remember, 1968. Although
we got 3 within living memory. You don't remember 2002?
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. Besides this year, we've got 2002 and 2014.
Oh,
right?
Okay. All right.
And I guess you could technically say 1970. I don't know why Ohio State claims that one. I think that's really weak because they lost their last game of the season to USC in the Rose Bowl. But anyway, regardless, in the last 25 years, we've got 2002, 2014, and then, of course, now in 2025. How would you rank those national championships?
Oh, that's a good question.
Does the lack of a Michigan win change any of your calculations on that for this season?
A little bit.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think it well, in terms of, I mean, I look at the championship. I look at the postseason performance differently than I do the entire sum of the season.
Sure.
So I don't let it detract. I mean, if I were to really let it detract from the joy of winning a national championship, I'd be a very unhappy person.
Well,
like, and I was worried about that, honestly, going into the game. It's like, am I really like, I Michigan fan that I know sent me a meme of like the Wojak that's like a puzzle. Holding the 13-10 box.
That's the missing piece.
Game. Yeah, he's like, I'll never be complete. And I'd laughed so hard because it was like I was genuinely very frightened. That was how I was going to feel even if they won. But then the win actually happened, and I'm watching it unfold with my family, and I get to sing Carmen, Ohio with my dad, and the endorphin release is like, no, this is so great.
It's so awesome.
I'm enjoying all this. So I don't let it detract from the actual value of the title. But if you're asking me like the sum of those 3 seasons, which one do you consider the most?
Yeah, because it's not just the one game. We're taking it as a totality, as a whole.
2002, I mean, they were the first team to ever go 15-0.
14-0.
14-0,
yeah.
Right? Okay. No, the Michigan people are going to be the ones to claim the 15-0.
Yeah.
But we'll see how many wins from that season get vacated. Maybe they'll be the first team to go 8-0 and win the national championship. Other than Alabama won like 12 games during COVID. I don't know. They didn't cancel games in the South the way they did in the Midwest because we're responsible about people's health. Anyway, 2002, they're undefeated. I think aesthetically not the most pleasing team.
How old were you in 2002? How much do you remember of that?
I was in 3rd grade.
Okay.
And it was great because I grew up the only Ohio State fan in my town. And the only other person that was an Ohio State fan was my 3rd grade teacher. So we were both
That's cool. No, that's fun. That's really cool.
We were both so jazzed.
Yeah.
Everybody else, especially because there's like 4 or 5 Michigan fans in the class, or all they don't want to hear anything. But even in 3rd grade, this is like my first conscious memory of Ohio State. You got to tell me,
football. Man. I grew up in southwestern Ohio. It's like the home. It's like the highest concentration of contrarians on the planet. So I had to deal with hearing about it every time Michigan won.
Well, contrarian, sure, but not outright Michigan fan.
Oh yes,
I grew up in the nest.
I'm telling you, man. There's more than you think. Brady Hoke is from Kettering. I just want to throw that out.
But you definitely had more Ohio State support in that sector than I was dealing with in
that's probably true.
Chicago.
Sure.
So I grew up basically in enemy territory, behind enemy lines, as my father likes to say. So 2002, this is a great question, and it merits more discussion than we're probably going to be able to give it. but I have to say that like other teams have have run the table and won the national title since. It's special that they were the first team to go 14-0, but obviously it's and the team that they beat, you could make a case was the best team that they beat of the three that they've beat in the title game.
Mm-hmm.
So that certainly
I would argue
makes
that.
it special and it's right too. I think it would be hard to argue against that, to be honest, between I don't think this Notre Dame team they just beat is better than Marcus Mariota's Oregon team or that Miami team that had all those future NFL stars.
No.
Yeah. But 2014, and I'm heavily biased because I was in school then, so I'm obviously going to cherish that for the rest of my life, as I would any other title win, but that one's special when you're actually at the university and you're a student.
Sure.
The thing about 2014, further than the fact that it was the first edition of the playoff, you are never going to see a team win a title with their third string quarterback ever again.
Third string quarterback nobody had ever heard of. Like, that's the thing. Like,
the fact that I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. You think about it in the NIL era and the transfer era and stuff like that. It's like, okay, well, we got all these guys. People know who they are. This guy may have been really good at a MAC school, but now he's going to be a backup somewhere. My point is that because of the way rosters are constructed now, right? I think there's more familiarity with some of these players, and there's the assumption that if you're one of the top 5 teams in the country, your third string guy is going to be really good, right? That was not the case in 2014. Nobody knew who the hell Cardale Jones was, right? Prior to that season starting.
Not only
people didn't even know how to spell his name. We were calling him Cordale instead of Cardale.
Yeah.
Like, no, but for real.
I remember that now that you said it.
That's my point.
I remember that.
And so Braxton Miller goes down, and then JT Barrett goes down. And that's
the other point I wanted to make.
Right.
Is that, the expectation for the team that just won was that they were going to win the national championship.
Correct.
They did.
Correct.
I'm sure similar expectations existed back then, but I remember the day I drove back to campus to start junior year, I pull in and I turn on the TV and the news is Braxton Miller's done already.
And you're like,
the first
season
game has
over.
been played.
Right.
At that point, you're already moving the goalposts in terms of your expectations. And there's no guarantees with this guy coming in, JT Barrett. And then they lose to Virginia Tech. And at that point, you're thinking there's going to be growing pains. And
9-10 wins max.
We're just going to have to take what we can get as fans at this point. They run the table from there. They lose JT and I'm 2 years removed from watching Derrick Rose's knee explode as a Chicago Bulls fan. So I'm the dread that is in that stadium when JT gets hurt. I'm thinking, why do I have to keep enduring these kinds of things as a sports fan? This is so ridiculous. And that point, you're not really expecting anything from Cardale. Then the Big Ten championship happens, and then the CFP, the rest is history.
Yeah.
That is, I honestly don't think there's ever going to be a more special championship run in my lifetime than that. Nobody expected that team to do what they did, and to do it in the fashion that they did it's unprecedented, and frankly, I think it's unreplicable. Irreplicable. Without ability to be replicated. I don't know what the word is, but it ain't happening again.
No, I'm with you on that. If I had to rank them, I think 2014 would be at the top 2. I will say, that's
what your hat says.
Well, that's, what, undisputed, right? I will say this. Let's see. I think I was a senior when they won it I was a senior for the 2002 season in high school. And I have really fond memories of that. But I was thinking about this. I'm like, how would you like personify these seasons, right? Like if you had to attach some kind of like avatar to these seasons and distill them into one thing. And I was like, the 2002 season was kind of like Legend of the Drunken Master with Jackie Chan, where like the dumber he gets, the better he fights. And you're watching these Ohio State games, and you're like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Like what? They're winning games by completing 3 passes like that. What, like you don't know how it's working, but it keeps working. And
to your point, I think the play that is most memorable, frankly, from the title game, other than the penalty and other than the last play where they actually won,
Yeah.
was Maurice Clarett
Yes,
forcing the fumble on the interception return.
from Sean Taylor.
That doesn't happen.
No,
It's so rare that
nothing
you see
about that made sense
from any team in a season.
I can't. Honest to God, I can't think of another time I've ever seen that.
It usually happens at least once a season in like the sport, but it's very rare that you see 2 turnovers on the same play.
Yeah, it was that whole year was just insanity, and that holds a special place in my heart because it is so goofy and ridiculous. And I mean, Jim Tressel won it in the most Jim Tressel way possible.
At 100%. 100%.
And in the same way that 2014 can't be replicated, it's the same thing with 2002. You can't play that football. You can't do that in football anymore. It's not, even at the time. That's why Miami was such huge favorites. You're looking at this and like, these guys are dinosaurs. What are we doing? How are they in the national championship? And then they won. And it made no sense at the time. People are still trying to make sense of it. I love that. Now, that's not to take away from any of these championships. They're all super special in their own way. But yeah, it's all of them I think are really, really fun.
It's a very interesting conversation. I think you can make a case for all 3 of them.
Well, I'll tell you what, this has gone a little bit longer than I anticipated, but I probably should have.
I told you this was going to happen.
I know. But
it's what other game would be worth it, you know?
Right. Well, we'll
have so much more to talk about next week too.
I know. Well, let's go ahead and do Ask Us Anything. So I'll skip a few and save them for next time here. But I do want to talk about some of the stuff. This is from the one and only Jen. This is from 3 days ago. So we're recording this on
Wednesday night.
Wednesday. Yeah. So basically the day of the game is when she sent this.
Based on how you described this question, I don't know if Jen knows what day it is either.
I don't either. Honest, so it's the lone Jen who listens to the Dubcast hollering at you again. That's actually probably accurate. I'm in Atlanta and kind of tipsy, just sang some Journey separate ways, of course, at live band karaoke. And I think you converted some folks to be Buckeye fans. Okay. The Ask Us Anything portion of last week's show made me think you should add a shirt to the fine sponsor of this program. Oh, the 11 Dubcast is also sponsored by the Dry Goods Store, 11warriors.com. Totally forget about that. Here's Ask Us Anything.
Shirts, hats, stickers. Go buy them. There's a lot.
There is. And by the way, national championship.
Okay, so here's what we need to do. You need to forward this email to Jason, and we need to get our Dubcast Knows Ball shirt in production.
There we go.
All right.
Good. All right. So anyway, she didn't really... she kind of asked the question, but how do you plan to spend your football offseason aside from following women's hockey religiously? Basically that, ignoring... the men's basketball team just had a pretty good win. Honestly, probably watching a lot of women's basketball and women's hockey. Like, those are the 2 most exciting teams, honestly, at Ohio State right now. Like, hell yeah, I'll check those guys out and see how they're doing. That's kind of where I'm at. I mean, I want the basketball team, but there you go. Mac Ingram wrote, no question, just 10 out of 10 Gatorade bath. So that's good.
That was pretty good. It's rare that you see the front bath, you know.
Yes.
Most of the time they do. Well,
they grabbed him.
One.
There
was no reason. It was like there was no surprise. I mean, actually, there was that was my point. It's rare that you see the surprise from the front Gatorade bath.
Yes,
you know,
right.
I know they had to grab him, but he still reacted to it like he was kind of surprised it was coming, even though he was probably trying to get away. Or I don't think he was trying to get away because it happened right after he yeeted the headset, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So he was more focused on that. Then he did it. Then he got turned around and they got him from the front. Yes. It was great. You never see the bath from the front. It's always the sneaky bath.
Ryan Day had a fun quote about him just throwing his headset into the sun. He said he didn't even remember what he was doing or why he was doing it. He just it was just this moment of exuberance he had.
Yeah, you're just vibing in the moment, man. I totally get it.
Yeah.
I wonder how many people, you know how you can bet on the color of the winning team's Gatorade in the Super Bowl? Mm-hmm. I wonder how many people anticipated green.
I did not expect
Ohio
green.
State.
I didn't
especially
because
they were playing Notre Dame.
Yeah, I was surprised, but that would be probably the last one I would have guessed. Yeah, I would have thought
they were drinking leprechaun blood to
right. Sorry, they're going into they're like going into the line of scrimmage, just like, yeah.
They're like flaring their green tongues at the Irish.
That's right.
Like, oh my God.
That's weird. This is from Evan. Has 11 Warriors considered using Garrick's awesome photos to create a book that commemorates the season to sell the dry goods store? That is an excellent idea. I will pass that along. Garrick, by the way, absolutely been killing it on photos. All the stuff that we use on the site, all these header photos. I mean, if you're like, wow, that's a great shot, that's because of Garrick. Sorry. He's done an incredible job. He deserves all the flowers for that. He's done amazing work. This is from Jonathan. Do you think runners up look at film from the championship loss? No, I don't. And then he also had.
If they want to win a title the next season, they should.
I guess, but the teams are going to be so different. I don't know what you learned from it aside from being angry. Which
if
maybe
you're bringing back a lot of people from the previous season, I feel like it would be well within your, Yeah. If you really want to improve on where you made mistakes. I would hope the coaches do at least.
Well, I'm sure they do, yeah. But, we'll see how it goes. I mean, Ohio State, they've got a lot to learn from. They got next year, this Ohio State football team is going to look a lot different. But my fingers are crossed.
Second shortest odds to win it all.
I think
behind only Texas, and I think that's just Archie Manning hype.
Right. I think at this point it's mostly just hype. I do hope they can convince Quinshon to come back for another year, but that may be a long shot. We'll see. Okay.
Not in this era, it isn't.
Well, that's the thing. And one of the stats that I saw the other day was like prior to NIL, the average amount of underclassmen who declared for the draft was like 100 basically every year. And now it's like 70.
Yep.
That's good. That's good. That's unequivocally good. You can't hedge on
healthy for the sport.
That's healthy for the sport. It's great for the kids. They're getting degrees. I don't know how you complain about that. I think that's awesome.
And the thing is too, I don't know what Judkin's draft projection is.
It's a running back heavy class though.
Well, not only that, Henderson was a back of the third round pick. If he left last year, he got paid, came back, won a title, and is now projected to be like a early second round pick.
Yeah. And he showed his versatility this year too. Like he had a lot of opportunities to do more stuff this past season, and I think that helped him immeasurably.
One of the big things I wanted to make this point earlier when you were highlighting it. One of the big things that I talk about, I've made the point on the show several times before that this Ohio State being such a feeder program for NFL talent. They do such a great job, even going back to the Urban Meyer. This is just, I think, a cultural thing that goes back to Urban Meyer and probably even Jim Tressel to a certain extent. But particularly Urban Meyer is they do such a good job of identifying and coaching up the things that NFL teams want to see on a position-by-position basis and making sure their players leave with it. That's why you see guys like Curtis Samuel, who was playing here 10 years ago, scoring touchdowns in the NFL playoffs for the Buffalo Bills. The big thing they do with the running backs is that every single one of them can block. It's the biggest reason why Ezekiel Elliott was the 4th overall pick for the Cowboys, was because people looked at him and said, he's coming into the league right now, probably the best pass blocking running back as a rookie before he even plays a single snap.
And they're going to say the same thing about TreVeyon Henderson. They're going to say
the metamorphosis that Henderson has had as a blocker in his time at Ohio State is unbelievable.
Yeah.
He was incredible. And Judkins, I don't know what kind of blocker Judkins was at Ole Miss, but you saw in the Texas game when he maybe could have been called for forcible contact foul, getting that block, but still put him on the turf.
Yeah.
Both of them exceptional blockers. Judkins has already improved his stock a little bit just from coming over here. You wonder if they can sell him on, we can make you a competitive offer relative to what your rookie deal is going to be. You come back, you have another chance to maybe improve your stock even further, and then you go out next year. But the thing is, given that workload he had at Ole Miss, he's got a lot of tread on the tires already.
I was thinking about that a lot, actually.
Yeah.
That had to have been such a huge relief towards the end of the season for him, where he was like, oh, I don't have to carry the ball 400 times. And I can still have a huge impact and still be a nationally known guy. Like, That had to have been such a huge relief.
But
for
if
that
he
dude.
comes back, they're not going to use Peoples the way that they used Henderson, I don't think, at least not right away. So he would presumably have to absorb a larger role.
Well, that's why
you
they
still
brought
want
in
to leave some tread on the tires for
yeah,
the NFL.
and that's why they brought in the dude from West Virginia. But we'll see what
that's
happens.
that's a good point.
Yeah, I love my big West.
But that
Virginia
guy
boy.
ain't Travion Henderson
No.
either.
No, he's averaging about 4.5 yards a carry. He's the big boy.
He's Diet Judkins.
Yeah. Well, no, he's not diet anything. That guy's 6'3" and like 235. All right. Couple closing thoughts. Here's the one I want to have here, and then I'll give you your chance, and we'll take a quick break.
Is that all the Ask Us Anythings this week?
That's Ask Us Anything. Thank you guys for writing that. I have other Ask Us Anythings, but we're saving them for Sunday, so don't worry. I'll get to them. I promise.
Right.
They're less relevant to the national championship game. Here's my closing thoughts. First of all, I think it's incredibly important as fans, as people who, support the team, cheer on the team, watch the team, all this other stuff, write about them, talk about them. You have to let the team write their own stories. I am so tired of, people watching a single game, even a Michigan game, and going, it's over. It's over. I know what this team's
we did that to
do.
Michigan after the Illinois game.
Yes, we did. And that's fine because it's Michigan. Who cares?
Well, that leads right into your point that you have to let the team write their own story.
Right. And so
even if you don't root for them.
Well, I'm too mean to do that, to have that grace for Michigan. But for Ohio State, I do think it's super, super, super important to understand that you have to let these teams write their own stories. And if you're a fan of Ohio State, you would think that history of Ohio State is more instructive than most other teams about this, right? We just talked about 2002, a team that nobody believed in until they did it. In 2014, a team that was basically snake bitten from 2 weeks before the season started, and just an impossibility that they were able to do what they did. And then this team overcoming the negativity and the anger and all the vitriol that was thrown at them after the Michigan game. You have to let these teams write their own stories. When they say that they did this for each other because they want another week together, for other teams that would kind of seem like pablum. Like, okay, it's something they tell themselves. I truly believe it about this team, that they were doing it for each other. And if we had listened to that, I don't know that the Tennessee game would have come as a shock. I don't know that their win against Oregon was coming as a shock, because this was a team that was truly, truly doing things for each other, and not just for each other, but
the
for
Oregon win shocked everybody.
Well, yeah,
but
specifically, not just for each other, but specifically for Ryan Day. And, for as much crap as this guy has gotten, okay, I think all of that needs to go out the window. Now, I'm not saying that, an 0-4 record against Michigan is acceptable in the last 4 games. Okay, I'm not saying that. But I am saying the insanity that has been directed his way, that has to stop, right? You don't have a leg to stand on. And people who are saying like, oh, well, we bullied him into it. No, you didn't. You didn't do anything. All you did is made a guy's life worse, okay? So you need to shut up.
For him and his family.
Yeah. Well,
His family too, like that kind of.
His wife was talking about how they hired security. This is insanity. You have to let these teams write their stories.
His kids were getting bullied by their teachers at school.
You have to believe in these guys, okay? Insofar as you're supporters of the team, and all this vitriol, all this hate, all it does is make you look stupid when a team goes out and does this incredible thing that they just pulled off. Okay.
Yeah.
So like I said, I might have been frustrated. I might have been upset after the Michigan game, but that just makes me more impressed and proud of what they did these past 4 games. Okay. It doesn't make me angry or like, oh, I was proven wrong and you got me this time right. No. Okay. I can appreciate what happened because they put it all on the line for each other, not for me, not because of what I said. I can sit back and say, I'm in awe of what you were able to do together. And I can appreciate that as a fan. And that's my role. And so, again, these teams have to write their own stories. Let them write their own stories and then appreciate it or make comments on whatever.
And I think I was probably even more critical of Day than you were after the Michigan loss. But sure. I never wanted to let it get to the point where I was like, I think this guy should be outright fired. Yeah, I was in the position.
No, I don't think you were. No, I don't think you did.
I was in the position where I said, I can't give this guy the benefit of the doubt anymore after this game. And at that point, we were still in a position where that narrative about his performance in big games against credibly like top 5 ranked opponents, not the James Franklin teams of the world, was very much
James Franklin will never count.
No, he doesn't count. He would have been in the national championship if he did count, but he wasn't. He got pantsed by Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame, even though they were winning that game at one point. Anyway, at that point after the Michigan game, there was enough reason, and in wake of how they lost that game, that it was there was smoke to the fire of the narrative that he was struggling to win the big ones at Ohio State. I could understand where those people were coming from that wanted him to go.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want him to go because I was in the position where it's like, I don't know how many other better candidates there are out there. Now, I did point to Marcus Freeman as an option, and in hindsight, it seems like, hey, that wouldn't be so bad.
I think Freeman's a great coach. I think he'll, dumb decision aside on the field goal, I think he's
young enough too that if Day ever ends up hanging it up whenever the time comes,
or heading to the NFL or something like that,
you would hope Freeman comes home. But
I
back at the beginning of December, end of November, when we're all stewing in our feelings, I was in the camp that I thought, this guy, I don't know how I can give him the benefit of the doubt back unless they run the table, and that's much easier said than done given the challenge that awaits them. And they ran through that challenge with flying colors in a way that you have to feel good about it. That being said, part of the reason that I wanted to kind of go to the edge on those feelings without jumping all the way off is because I knew there were a ton of people that outright wanted him gone, and that even before that game outright wanted him gone and believed that they were enlightened by their own hatred of Ryan Day that was stronger than how much they loved Ohio State.
Right.
And it's very, very funny to me that you bring up the switching of when people are saying like, oh, I bullied them into that. I wonder who you're referring to specifically when you're
I can't
making
imagine
that point.
I'm saying that in general.
Maybe
I'm not referring to anyone
bank
specific.
robbing enthusiast that may or may not have used to be affiliated with the brand of which we are repping this podcast. Anyway,
I'm not referring to anyone specific. I never would. But my general point again is let the teams write their own stories. And Ohio State in 2024, 2025 wrote a hell of a story. And we're going to be talking about this for a long, long time. And if you allow your feelings about like superiority and trying to be smarter than Ryan Day or trying to be like, I know what this team's going to do, whatever, you're doing yourself a disservice because this rules. Well, this freaking rules. They won a national championship.
This is my last thought on this because I did want to pivot from what's happening to what the future looks like. Ryan Day is not going to win every game he coaches in for the rest of his life. Nick Saban didn't do that after he won his first championship at Alabama. Kirby Smart hasn't done that after he won his first championship at Georgia.
Right.
There's going to be another loss at some point. We don't know when it's happening. But when it does happen, that crowd that is now saying that they bullied Day into doing this is going to start up those conversations again.
Yes, they will.
One of my all-time favorite sports photos all in my entire life was from the Milwaukee Bucks championship parade, where everybody, this is the first time they've won since the Oscar Robertson era.
Oh yeah. It had been.
They're exalted over the moon. Giannis Antetokounmpo has risen to being like finally one of the undisputed best players in basketball. And amid this entire crowd of Milwaukee fans celebrating this moment, there's this one guy holding up a piece of paper that says "Fire Bud," which is a reference to their head coach Mike Budenholzer, who was ultimately dismissed in favor of, I think, who is it now? I think Doc Rivers is there now. I don't know if there was another guy that was there in between that, but Budenholzer did get fired a few seasons later. But There were so many people within that fan base that hated Budenholzer that in spite of the fact that they had just won the championship, one guy still felt like he had to take it upon himself to remind everybody they did it in spite of their coach who deserves to be fired.
That's sad.
Those kind of people are going to exist within every fandom,
Sure.
even if you win a title for the rest of your life. Don't be one of those people when Ohio State inevitably loses in the future.
Yeah,
it's going to happen. Take the bad with the good. There's not a lot of people doing it like Ryan Day, and he's finally delivered. You don't have to worry about, does he have the goods or not to get it done, because he just did.
Damn right.
He just did. Enjoy this. Cherish the moment. We have a whole offseason where every time you can think about this team, you can celebrate in your head that you got to witness the team that you love won the biggest prize in the sport. That is a feeling that a lot of people supporting their schools do not get to have for themselves.
Yep.
So cherish it, be proud of it, and if you ever get another one, it's just gravy.
Yeah.
You know?
Perfectly said, and a great way to exit this Dubcast that I thought was going to be like 35, 40 minutes.
The deeper we get into the off season, we're going to get back to under an hour.
I promise. Yeah. But honestly, no, but for real though, George, that was perfectly said. I couldn't put it any better myself. We'll be back at our regular time next week. Don't sweat. Don't fret. We'll be here. But until then, Ohio State, national champions of college football.
National champions.
The national champions. The Ohio State. See you at the Shoe on Sunday for the celebration. Or at, I think, Kroger, Meyer, and Giant Eagles in the Columbus area if you want to take a look at the trophy. But until then, I'm Johnny.
I'm George.
And we'll see you next time.
Take care. Go Bucks.
Go Bucks!
Yeah! That's right.